Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about code you might need in the future. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, as a software engineer, is it recommended not to write code that you think you might need in the future but don't need yet? Yes, that is very, 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 very recommended. The reason why it's very recommended is because you don't know what the future is going to hold most of the time unless you are gifted to in a way which a very, very, very small percentage of people are. And even those people sometimes get it wrong, so that's why I like to say that in order for you to be an oracle and see the future, you have to cultivate the perspective that any foresights you have, or like any idea that you get, has to be framed in a way that, number one, is very easy to communicate to other people so that you can sell the vision. Number two, it has to be disposable under all circumstances, no exceptions, because if you are wrong or the world changes, because that's the problem with seeing the future as a human, because if you have this ability, what you do is that you go by gut feeling, and that gut feeling is given to you through experience and calculating the probability of a sequence of events. Now the problem is that that sequence of events always has the possibility of an unknown entering into the equation. Because if it was magic, you would see the unknown parts of the equation as well. But for someone who usually can see the future, knows how things are going to play out, it's a calculation basically. You know sort of the step, all the events that are going to take place before they happen. But as I said, the problem is when something completely unforeseen happens, which there is always a chance. It's like, I think that there is this, I read this concept when we were talking about probability in school, where you can never be 100% sure about anything, because, as an example, you can say that you're 100% sure that your house is still going to be there when you get home, but there is always a percentual chance that there's a meteor that hits just your house. So therefore you can never be 100% for reasons like that. And that is why I tell people that the two main parts in order to determine when you are in a good position to write code that you may not need right now, but is going to need in the future, is when you can fulfill those two requirements. Otherwise you should never ever do it. And in general, you should try to avoid it even in those situations, because at the end of the day, guys, you can always, well, almost always at the very least, write the code that is necessary for the here and now. And even if you know that you're going to need some code in the future, why write it now? Ask yourself that. Why would I write code I don't need today now? It's just something that you're going to keep around. I've had this conversation with a lot of people, especially in the space of people who were, when we were moving over from CommonJS requires over to ES6 or ES modules import syntax, and there's been this time gap where you could use Babel or solutions like that in order to transpile, so you could use the import instead of the require. And I've always asked people, why would you do that? Why would you, when you can use a completely basic standard, in this case it's Node.js application setup, that doesn't require Babel, doesn't require any compilation, anything like that, why would you add that extra level of complexity on top of your work process just so you can write import instead of require? It made no sense to me, and the main feedback I got, the main answer was, well, because it's the syntax that's going to be in the future, so we might as well use it now. And so I asked, why not just wait until it is standard, and then you can literally do a string replace. You can literally it takes less than 10 seconds to write to run a search and replace string search and replace on your code base and rewrite the whole thing. That's sort of, or maybe it might take longer, but it's like nothing to do it. And I could never get an answer to that. Never. Because of this thing I'm talking about. Because the person is in the future state. They have this mental gremlin, mental desire. This is what the philosophers do, and it annoys the fuck out of me. They invest in things that are going to be useful in the future, but it's actually costing you more right now. And so you should always ask yourself that. Why am I doing the future thing now? Is there some point in the future where it's going to be impossible for me to do this? It's like, planning is a good idea. So if you know that this thing has to probably happen right now, because in the future I'm not going to be able to do it, or I'm not going to have a budget, or it's going to be too late, that's not a dumb idea. But if you're doing it just because you're going to need it without any real good reason, then you're actually adding code. And we all know, every single professional software developer knows that the more code you have, the more work you have, the more area for bugs and misunderstandings, etc., etc. The goal of any professional software developer is to minimize the amount of code that is necessary to do the job effectively. That is the end goal for all of us, to have the exact minimum, like the perfect amount of code for the problem. And you're not doing that if you're creating something for the future. As I said, there are situations where you have to start somewhere. That's also something that you account for, which is where I was talking about this other thing where number one is to be able to say, yes, I can communicate a vision, or like I can make people understand the vision that I have. And the second thing is to make it disposable. Because some things take so long or require so much investment that you can't just write them in a day or even in a week. You're going to have to do a migration or like a bigger type of investment. That doesn't mean that these things are bad. It just means that you have to go about it a slightly different way. So if you are one of those people who have the ability of foresight and you're able to predict what's going to happen before it happens, you have to understand that most people don't have that ability. And if you don't have the social skills or whatever in order to communicate what it is that you want to build, you are going to have to build it all by yourself. And it's going to be dangerous because people are going to wonder, why are you spending time on this thing, etc. You invite the risk of people who do not understand what you're doing to stab you in the back. And trust me when I say this, guys, I've been here. I know exactly how it feels to sell a vision to a manager, have that manager sound very supportive in the beginning, and then when their manager comes and asks why are we doing this, they stab you right in the back and say, I don't know, they're doing this thing and I wasn't so sure about it. They just backtrack on you because they have to cover their own ass, and that's it's a treat to work with people like that. So in that scenario, you really have to be able to sell the vision and really make people understand what it is that you're trying to build and make them see the value. That's where the soft skills comes in. This is what I've told you about, guys. As the more advanced the system that you're going to build, the more time you spend in IT, you will realize just how important soft skills are. Because I can promise you guys, no code is ever going to save your job or ever going to make people want you to give you time and budget and so forth. Nothing you could possibly write with on your keyboard is going to fix that problem. The thing that makes people believe and gives them the incentive to follow you or like to allow you to do things and all that stuff comes from one and only one thing: soft skills, vision, communication, all of this fluffy stuff that a lot of hardcore tech people don't really want to deal with. But it is important. It is the most important thing when it comes to actually getting the budget to do the thing. So what I want you to take away from this is that no, you should never, or yes, it is very good advice to never write code that you don't need right now but might need in the future. The exception to this is if you are very certain that this thing sort of has to happen now, because if it doesn't happen now, it's going to be too late in the future. And as I said, there are two things you have to check off your list before you do this. Number one, can you make other people understand why it's important to do this thing right here, right now? Because if they do not understand, if it's not crystal clear, you might get stabbed in the back. And I promise you, I've seen many software developers go down and in some cases get fired because they did not respect this chain of command or some other dumb thing like that, where they just went and did something, and then their managers felt that it was necessary to cover their ass, so they blamed whatever happens on them, or looks at it as insubordination, etc., etc., and then they're gone. And all that benefit that you were bringing, you kind of realize that, oh shit, my company owns the code, and I just took a risk so that I could write the nice code for the company, and then the company fired me. So why did you do it? Really? If you can answer that question, let's have a talk, because I think that you're going to find it interesting. The second thing is that you need to be able to throw away the solution. It cannot set you up a path where you're basically locked into this decision, and then, because what happens then is that you are going to die on that hill. You're going to try to force in your company or your people into a situation where you might be wrong about the thing, or you feel prestige, or you have like a personal ego type of thing, where it's then you can't fail anymore. This is something that happens a lot in management, by the by. You make a decision and then it doesn't really work out, but because your future in the politics within whatever company you're dealing with is so dependent on that you are associated with success, you will not admit that you made a mistake, because that means that you did something bad, and that is bad. But in general, guys, never ever pay the cost of something that's going to happen may happen in the future in terms of code before you have to, because the more code you have, the more area there are for bugs and misunderstandings and other problems that just slow you down in the here and now. Have a great day.